You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. the live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. I am your host, along with the great Malachi. When I say that, great, because he's following the beat of the city of Detroit on behalf of Bridge Detroit. And when I say that, it really is needed because the municipal government and politics being covered, so you know what's happening beat to beat, is very, very important. So I'm your host, Khary Frazier, along with Malachi, and we talking a lot about reparations today. I was given the opportunity to create a video essay or a documentary. I'm just, creative, so I changed the name up. But it is a debt owed, not a handout. That is the history of reparations in the city of Detroit. And we're going to talk a lot about that. The premiere is tonight, which we record. This is like you all are seeing the special seasoning. We record we record Public Comment on Wednesday mornings, the day after the Tuesday session for Detroit City Council. So Thursday is released. So last night, some of you all saw this documentary if you're watching now. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about the beats and some of the nuances. But with all that further ado, Malachi, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. You're too generous as always. I'm wiped. It was election night last night, so we were up late waiting for results to come in. I'm feeling good. You always pep it up, so I'm feeling good.
Hey, I feel you, my brother. I got my good water. I know you have usually your coffee. You don't even got coffee today.
I'm running on hope. That's it, man.
All right, so I'm gonna give a preface and then you can kind of get going. So a debt owed, not a handout, is the phrase that often was associated with Reparations Ray Jenkins when he would talk about reparations for Black people in America. Reparations Ray Jenkins is a Detroiter that comes by way of Memphis. And during the time of, white flight in the 60s, he was one of the real estate agents and realtors that eventually became a real estate broker that sold many of the homes that as Jewish families left Detroit's west side, he began to sell to Black families. My home itself that we're in right now and even next door were a part of this, as this was a Jewish community for so long. And Reparations Ray Jenkins did pretty well, as his son Ricardo Jenkins shared in the documentary. Like, yeah, my father was doing well in real estate, but he was driven more so to push forward reparations and the cause for reparations, knowing that it is a debt owed and not a handout. So he's bringing this up in the 60s, to the point where I have so many different anecdotes and everything, but people are looking at him, as Ricardo shared, his son. People thought he said, people thought my father was crazy at the time, and I can only imagine. But as time has moved on, it's still people that think that it's crazy and preposterous. And this video essay kind of explores that history. So without any further ado, now I'm going to put the ball in Malachi's court and get some questions from him so we can frame this up historically. But I start with Reparations Ray Jenkins and that phrase being the reason for the naming of the video essay.
We're going to put you on the grill now. You ready?
I'm ready.
You're under my microscope.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. I think this is interesting that you were brought in by the task force to do a video that looks back at the legacy of reparations work in Detroit, because I hear this a lot from people that either on the task force or have been watching it, that this is people feel like they're the heirs of this movement in the current day. They are carrying on the work of people like Reparations Ray. And it's interesting to kind of put that into historic context too, because it gives people a sense of where this started, where it's gone, and what is possible. So can you talk to me more about what did he want? Like, what was his vision for reparations? Like, was he trying to advocate more for the idea of it, or did he have like a specific kind of policy idea?
All right, so it takes on different morphs over time, but in 1967 he founds the organization SLAP, which I like that the name is SLAP, but Slave Labor Anniversary Pay. Eventually, this transitions to slave labor annuity pay, and the thought process behind it, even in 1967. So I'm talking about 1967, which I would have to pull up a calculator and everything. Is every Black American deserves $1 million, right? Um, Inside this documentary, I have some clips of a feature when in 1990 when he was on the American Black Journal, and he even kind of breaks it down. So a lot of the questions that come up today, like, so how do you define blackness? How do you define this? How do you define that? And what about the spending and all of that? Just poignant answers every beat, and you'll see it in the video essay where his response is like, look, everybody who's Black deserves it, whether you got here yesterday or you've been here, but definitely the people that been here deserve it first. Um, and being that bold to ask for $1 million then for every Black American, which I do believe, and this is kind of gets into some of the stuff we were talking about with Sherry Dagnago, of census tracts and where things stand. I mean, for so long, it seems like the population of Black people in America was always like 13 to 15%, which makes you think like, okay, it has to be higher or lower at some point in time, because I mean, just to remain in that static state for so long, it's hard to believe. But what the numbers were then, in 1967, to ask for something and be that bold, speaks loudly to Reparations Ray. And eventually he also becomes connected to many other people's in different movements, like in Cobra. There was a researcher, Chris Alston, that wrote into this. Also, Dr. Chris Alston, I believe, that connected to the city of Detroit. He's on that American Black Journal too, ally, and the looks at other forms. So it then takes on a look of saying like, look, what about scholarship for and education for young people? But it wasn't just in that facet. He dived deep into this work as one of the people that pressed consistently John Conyers about bringing reparations forward. His vision, and talk about somebody just doing grassroots activism, that was reparations, right?
Yeah, it's I just pulled up an inflation calculator. So $1 million in 1967 equals about $9.2 million today, to give you a sense of, how much money would have been on the table there.
Reparations, Ray, I'm all for you, my brother. I'm all for that, my brother.
I'm glad you brought up John Conyers too, because that's the other person that people really point to as, like,
Yes.
a foundational kind of leader of reparations movement. Those both were at the federal level, correct? What I think is interesting, kind of two things about that, right? So you have an effort to get the federal government to acknowledge its participation in slavery and all of the the impacts that came after that, legalized brutality, legalized racism and discrimination. And so that was kind of like the main target for a long time of how people were going to get, redress and make good on that. Let's point it to the federal government. Whereas now it's at the municipal level. Detroit's task force is focused on what has the city of Detroit done. Other task forces in other cities are similarly looking at what have their local governments done. There's about 100 cities now that have launched local task forces. So we've seen like a real shift from the federal to the local. I think part of that is because, the federal government and our leaders have never really expressed a lot of interest in doing anything about that. So two things. I mean, for you, like, why was the effort at the time so focused on the feds? And what was like the pushback from people in power at the time, like the mayors of Detroit, the governors of Michigan, the president, at the federal level? How did that HR 40, John Conyers resolution to establish a reparations commission, how did that land in Congress? Walk us through some of that.
All right. So let's like bring out like the family tree. So the video essay really focuses on the arc of a couple different stories, mainly Reparations Ray Jenkins, Congressman John Conyers, the chairman, and also JoAnn Watson. So it all kind of comes back 360 to everything. So let's pick up a Reparations Ray story, like how I start the video essay. So Reparations Ray is actually, as his Ray's son Ricardo shares, Reparations Ray provides John Conyers his very first fundraiser when he's running for Congress in 1964 inside his home in Russell Woods on Glendale Street. The very first person to do to hold a fundraiser, like a house party fundraiser, as we in the political season, was Reparations Ray for John Conyers. Now, at this time, he's not moving forward like the initiative, like he doesn't have SLAP. He's speaking of reparations because he would have these recurring dreams where he is experiencing the Middle Passage. And what pressed upon him was the story of his grandfather that was enslaved, and he said didn't die without a thing. And as he thought through things, this is what led to him advocating all the time. Now, another public figure that I believe is big in this movement is Queen Mother Moore, that is in Harlem, New York, but she's traveling the nation speaking about reparations. And so there are many different conferences she would go to. One of those key conferences that Jamon Jordan's highlights, I don't know if that makes the essay, but I want to say in like 1972, a political organizing conference that also puts the Henry brothers, Richard and Milton Henry, that are founders of the Republic of New Afrika, an organization right here founded in Detroit as well. So Omari Obadeli and Gaidi Obadeli. So I'm bringing all this stuff together because it all connects. So Omari Obadeli, Gaidi Obadeli are founding the Republic of New Afrika under the premise of that same arc in reparations. So on that federal level, what they're asking for, if you know the Republic of New Afrika, they're asking for the 5 most populated states with Black people that are in the Southern Belt, which also $400 million at the time. And that was at the founding of the Republic of New Afrika. And with that founding of the Republic of New Afrika, in that same arc of like, this is a debt owed, and we should carry on. And a lot of these teachings kind of come from Malcolm X after his passing. Betty Shabazz is the widow of Malcolm X and the vice president of Republic of New Afrika. Mother Moore is one of the elders and an advisor for the Republic of New Afrika. One of my mentors and big homies, Chokwe Lumumba, attorney Chokwe Lumumba, rest in peace, the late mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, hence that tie from Republic of New Afrika, is also one of the staunch members of the Republic of New Afrika. All of this connects federally because this is another one of those federal asks from the grassroots, right? So in this same arc, more discussions are starting in that 60s, 70s movement, Pan-Africanism, Afrocentricity. One of the key things at the time that John Conyers was always moving forward. Immediately after the assassination of Martin Luther King, John Conyers is advocating for a holiday to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. So the birthday song that we at every Black tradition sing, Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday to You, is actually a rallying cry for the movement to create a holiday on behalf of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? So this victory in 1984 really propels so many people to say, damn, John Conyers can do something on a federal level. So that naturally lends itself in 1988, when then President Ronald Reagan, I believe, transitioning over to Bush, which George Bush was a part of the Reagan cabinet, conservative Republican, provides $20,000 for every survivor of the Japanese internment camps during World War II. This sparks everything on a federal level, big time, to the point where USA Today, the day of that story, actually goes to Reparations Ray Jenkins' house and does an interview with him. And John Conyers is like, okay, this is the time. So at that time, he convenes a council of different people to lead a commission. The reason that John Conyers says a commission is needed is because a commission We'll have sitting members from the president, sitting members from Senate, like appointed members, and appointed members like I guess expert witnesses to explore all the harms done, what are the best ways to repair, and how to go about it. And this is in '88, right? So this commission then would have a onus in Senate, the president, and Congress to take action, right? Because now you're getting the legislative and executive bodies on a federal level to have that pressed upon them. Similar to Jamon Jordan, historian, gave some context to this. The Kerner Commission report, I don't know if people know this, but Lyndon Baines Johnson commissioned the Kerner Commission after so many of the rebellions and uprisings the nation in black communities of like, yo, what the hell is going on with these black people? Why are they so mad? I mean, I know everybody black watching is like, how did they not know that? Yeah, because the cognitive dissonance. All right, let's just say that. But the Kerner Commission report never gets officially released through the president because this is during the time of the Vietnam War. The findings were kept, but if it was officially released, now the groundswell for action to be taken is needed. The Kerner Commission report to this day is still quoted on the impacts of what's happened to the black community. Obviously, so much connected to enslavement, then Jim Crow and so many other, like, what do they call it? Race laws and things like that. So back to a groundswell of that federal action, the commission was looked at to basically say, okay, we can take executive action. So in '89, the first bill is HR 3745. Then eventually it becomes HR 40 for the 40 acres and a mule, where John Conyers at that time, he has enough juice to say, hey, hold HR 40, and we're going to continue to reintroduce this every time he's in session, every 2 years consecutively. That first committee to write this legislation included Reparations Ray Jenkins. Also, other notable Detroiters, Betty Shabazz, as we talk about the Republic of New Afrika, and the Obadeli brothers. Also, Queen Mother Moore, Bob Johnson. Who else is in that? Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, and many others. Janice Hazel, that is a current member of the Reparations Task Force for the city of Detroit, was working in Conyers' office in Washington, D.C. at the time. It was one of the people leading the interviews with many of these people. We actually have in the documentary one of the first official press releases about HR 3745 from Janice Hazel in this information. So I know I gave a lot of juice to everything, but the exhaustive measures of what could be done began then, right? So from that time, things move forward. And one of the key things that actually moves forward on a federal level is, John Conyers is getting some support from different congressional members every year, but it's slow to the draw. Not even every black congressional member was on board at first, but he's winning it as time goes. Also during this time, so that's 1989, we have a big cultural event in America that takes place in '95, and that's the O.J. Simpson trial. After the O.J. Simpson trial, the thing that stood out in Black America, definitely, and probably in white America for a whole opposite reason, is Johnnie Cochran is an exceptional attorney, great legal mind, and Johnnie Cochran had definitely a knack for fighting white supremacy, and he takes up a mantle with many other attorneys to say, okay, we're going to take on this reparations fight, but the angle we're going to look at this in is we're going to look at this from a business angle. We're going to pursue every business that profited from the enslavement of our people. So when this happens, this gets some things moving. Johnnie Cochran passes away, but the movement is still continuing. And one of the things that was run into immediately, as you can only imagine, corporate attorneys were like, we don't have to disclose this information. We don't have to disclose this information. So then this is when Alderman, council member of Chicago, or alderman in Chicago, Dorothy Tillman moves forward legislation to say, if you want to contract and do business with the city of Chicago, and you made money from enslavement of black people, you need to disclose that before we vend or contract with you. This is in 2005. The other person that does this is the other person in the arc of this documentary, and that's Council Member JoAnn Watson. And it is causing hysteria at the time. As Ken Coleman, another person in the documentary, says, like, this is a little bit of post 9/11. Everybody's like, let's come together. And you have Council Member JoAnn Watson doing two things that are just like looked at in Metro Detroit. Like, what the hell is she doing for Black people? But everybody that's Black is like, hell yeah. So she's introducing Africa Town, a business district on behalf of Black people and Black businesses, partner with a lot of different people that becomes Paradise Valley, where Reparations Ray Jenkins has a street named after him. And obviously from my godmother, the Honorable JoAnn Watson. But this is where the fight becomes a little bit more municipal, right? And as that municipal look is looked at, a lot of these attorneys are saying, okay, it's other wrongs that can be repaired. Hence, we can look at this from a municipal level, and that's starting in 2000 from this in a Detroit lens. So some of these statutes and ordinances that are on the books, I don't know how much the enforcement goes and everything like that, but it's on the books to give a precedent for legal standing. So it's a lot of talks happening. JoAnn Watson is a member of NCOBRA. NCOBRA is an organization for reparations that exists today, but it comes out of the founding of the Republic of New Afrika. Really, there was in 1987, Jamon Jordan information. It was a conference, or no, this is Kwasi Akwamu information. 1987, there was a conference from the National Council of Black Lawyers, and at this conference, the argument for reparations is raised by Mario Bedelli. One of the main people that step up, another Detroiter, and my mentor, Chokwe Lumumba, steps up and says, yeah, we need to move forward with this fight. So this is like the founding of NCOBRA. One of the original members of NCOBRA here in Detroit is JoAnn Watson. And let me give JoAnn Watson's ties to Mario Bedelli as well. Mario Bedelli and his brother Gaedio Bedelli, Richard Henry, Milton Henry, as I say, they were strong in ties to Malcolm X, but also Martin Luther King and many others in struggle. But across the street from Central High School, where my godmother attended, is their organization goal and the Malcolm X Society. And this is where she begins to just recognize a lot of the game and tutelage of Mario Bedelli. So like these ties and these roots are like happening in these discussions. And also in the mix of all of this, another member of NCOBRA is Reparations Ray Jenkins and Cicero Love in Detroit and so many others. Like the Republic of New Afrika and NCOBRA are almost like single-handedly like one hand in hand in the origins and how it starts. And the reparations discussion municipally begins, and I'm tying it all to Detroit from this documentary, from saying, okay, we're exhausting the federal fight, and it's not like we're switching from one to another. It's almost like when you're making dinner, you know what I mean? I got to make some rice, I'm gonna make some salmon, I'm gonna make some broccoli, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna make some garlic bread, you know what I'm saying? Let's get some other eyes on the stove going.
Sounds like a good dinner. All right. Well, obviously, people need to watch this documentary because you have a lot of information you just brought forward that I had never heard before. I think it's really fascinating. I don't know where to start with all that. I think maybe to leave off, we could talk about. Well, first of all, what happened with Watson's the policy to get disclosure on whether businesses profited from slavery? Did that end up happening in Detroit?
Oh yeah, June 25th, 2005, that passes. And as Ken Coleman said, conservative talk radio locally was had many of things to say at the time. But Black radio in Detroit, where Mama Watson, my godmother, comes from, wake up, Detroit, as she'd always say. That's where it kicks off. It's like, oh man. And like the pulse in that grassroots activist community is like, this was needed. But there were also certain people that's like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? They didn't understand the larger framework of the legal cause that is running concurrent with the federal clause. I don't know how many people know this, but we have a nation where our laws are based on precedent, right? So if we establish precedent, hence this is the same strategy exhausted from from Attorney Houston that leads into Thurgood Marshall, that breaks Brown versus Board of Education, that establishes the ground for the Civil Rights Act. Other work in legislation that is directly connected to the chairman, John Conyers, as well. So it's like, it's some exhaustive measures of like, we've seen this work before. Let's put this together the right way.
I'm just like, I'm soaking all this up. This is really interesting. Maybe because we got to kind of wrap up here, and I'm wondering if you can kind of explain now how, a lot of these individuals that you've named have passed. How is Detroit's current effort with this task force carrying on that work? How aware are they of where they stand in this history that dates back so long? Do they feel a responsibility to carry the ball forward?
All right. So in classic Khary thought process, the creativity, it's almost like you want to go ninja smoke on that question. But okay. So the current task force, we have to look at what that was. 2021, Keith Williams, a chair of this task force, leads the petition for reparations in the city of Detroit to explore this in the committee. And historic, like in a landslide election, 80% vote. You know what I'm saying? Like 80% of Detroiters usually don't vote for anything. You know what I'm saying? Let alone something like this. But we can only imagine that something like this is, pretty big. So, so that's the origin of this. As it goes through the committee structure, and you all can go through the archives, and we're going to renew that, but it becomes a task force. The difference between a task force and a commission and a committee and where things go and executive action versus legislative action is municipal politics 101 that we'll present later. But a task force is created from this, ushered in and brought forth through Council President Mary Sheffield. And after those actions, different members are appointed. Like I mentioned, Janice Hazel and many others. I think that similar to the voters, and every time this discussion comes up, I say the creativity, it's like the Chappelle Show episode of, as people know, the classic, what is it? All types of stuff. If you watch that clip, and I may be dating myself, but on
I was
reparations,
thinking about the player haters ball when you said Chappelle. There's a lot of
it's some player haters ball happening too. But how it's a lot of questions that come forward when we're talking about empowering a grassroots community, especially for Black people in America, of how and what and where it comes from and where things are and what should be done. Is it ever enough? I think it's a lot of questions because I don't know how clear a lot of people are on how the language was written by the legal department that's leading to the task force, that's leading to the actions of the task force. In November, a report will be provided from the task force of the municipal harms. So I believe that, you also have the passing of my godmother, JoAnn Watson. You have some members stepping down, and, this is reparations. So it becomes a national story immediately. I presented some ideas of what I think could be done in the first meeting and everything. And from that action, and it becomes a national story. It's a lot of eyes and a lot of attention on this. And I do believe that, like a lot of organizing and work, what I learned even in doing this documentary is it's going to take commitment. And that understanding is not going to be provided in the context of the war chest of a corporate campaign of media and marketing and publicity. No, it's not. It's going to have to be door to door. Reparations Ray Jenkins, I'm going to leave you with this. I mean, damn, dude. This guy he literally wrote every sitting president, every sitting U.S. senator, every sitting U.S. congressperson, every sitting governor, every sitting Michigan state representative, every sitting Michigan state senator, every sitting Detroit city mayor, every sitting Detroit city council member from 1967 all the way to his passing. in 2009. Every year he wrote them about reparations, right? One of those years in 1996 is Bill Clinton was campaigning. It's like in his records. He slips past Secret Service and drops a note in the pocket of Bill Clinton about reparations, which is very bold action to take. And also, I don't know who was working Secret Service that day. I'm pretty sure that person got fired. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's going to take a commitment, and I'm hoping that this video essay can kind of like connect people more to like the roots, and that they're seeing the heirs, and that it does take work. I mean, I can't imagine that type of letter. I can't imagine that type of emailing campaign, let alone like writing a letter and sending it off. And he's a very successful real estate person. Like, it's not like he's sitting at the crib not doing nothing, you know. So it's going to take some commitment.
Well, you can get involved in the reparations task force this Saturday. There is another meeting March 2nd at Farwell Recreation Center from 2 to 4 p.m. You can also watch online. If you go online to the city's website, they've got a link for you to participate. Watch the documentary. I'm excited to check it out. There's a screening tonight, and then it'll go up online places. Where can people find it?
It will be right here on Detroit is Different, but also the city, I'm sure, is going to figure out what the city's going to do with it. I want this story told. It was a lot that went into it. Lord knows the amount of time and effort. I was like, man, I need reparations for this. I'm just but nah, this was cool. Honoring my godmother was really the key hook, but then I often take for granted the impact of the chairman, Councilmember Conyers. I interviewed John III and Monica Conyers, and immediately, just like the stories of the coalition building and my stories with John Conyers, another Northwestern guy, mighty Colts. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, it was powerful. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, you'll be able to see this doc, and I'm gonna be happy to check this up.
Cool. Well, find us on bridgedetroit.com for city council coverage and continuing coverage of the task force. They added another member, Dr. Gloria House, on Tuesday at the city council meeting. But you can find all that for free, bridgedetroit.com. Keep up with us.
I know, but you need to donate. I know I need to renew my update and donation because it's in my inbox. I was like, I got one from Steven, and I got one from Orlando. I know the one from Christine is coming. Look, give to Bridge Detroit. It's independent journalism needed. And on that note, we're going to close out with another one of my big homies. I always say Mama and Ned, but Dr. Gloria House being there, legendary. She, in the passing of Mama Watson, in our own graceful way, like, it's a couple of people I go to for always, like, okay, am I standing with the people? Am I standing with the people? The first person I always call Mama Aneb is like high on that list. So I'm very happy she's there. So with that, peace.